You're watching the EdReach Network.
Hey, welcome to KeyNote Theater, part of the EdReach Network, giving educators a voice, a big voice. This is episode 4, and we're going to be watching Dan Pink, The Surprising Science of Motivation. And I have some very special guests with us, with me this evening. First of all, from last week, we had Kevin Brookhauser on the EdReach Network for the first time, and we're delighted to have you back. Welcome back, Kevin.
Thanks. It's great to be back. This is an awesome group of people.
Yeah, you know, I've been really excited and psyched out to go through this, and even as I was preparing, I was watching this and thinking about all the things that we could be talking about. Kevin, you just became a Google certified teacher, right?
I became a Google certified teacher in 2010 in London.
Oh, well, a couple of years ago.
Yeah.
You are from Monterey.
Yeah, I teach high school English. I teach 10th grade English at York School, which is a small independent school in Monterey.
And do you ever run into Clint Eastwood out there? He's not too far.
Not very often, but his wife still has quite a bit of a presence around. We see her a little more often. Dina.
Well, Mrs. Eastwood. Say hi to Mrs. Eastwood for me.
Yeah, my wife actually went to school with their daughters.
Oh, wow, cool. Matt Montaigne, also Google certified teacher. I remember you from G Taco. That would be Google's Teacher Academy out in Colorado. How are you doing today?
Good. Thanks for doing this, Dan, and thanks for inviting me into the conversation.
Wow. Well, you are very welcome, man. This is it's exciting. It was a good group, and I know you guys have probably seen this TED Talk a million times. But my third guest here, Mr. Carl Fish from Colorado as well, if I'm correct.
Yes,
correct?
You are correct. Coming to you from beautiful Highlands Ranch, Colorado, just south of Denver.
Carl, I don't know that I've actually talked with you in person before. Maybe after a talk or something that you gave, but I've been following your work for a long time. I've been reading The Fishbowl, and certainly. Many, 3-4 years ago, when the idea of the fish flip became something ingrained.
Let's call it something different, please.
Well, I had John Bergman and Aaron Sams on a couple weeks ago, and we were talking about where the flip the classroom idea came from.
Yeah.
And I think that's pretty much where it started. I don't know. Are we right on that?
Where what started? The name?
The classroom idea, that term perhaps came from there?
Yeah, I think that's kind of when Flip took over the buzzword winner of that, I guess, was when Dan wrote that, yeah. I just read Edutopia the other day, and George Lucas used Flip the Classroom. He used Yep. In his blog posts. I thought that was kind of telling. Well, thank you all three gentlemen for joining me today here on Keynote Theater. We want to get into Dan Pink, and just so our audience knows, there's a few rules for us about Keynote Theater. The idea here is we're going to play the Keynote any time we feel that we want to make a comment or a commentary on what's going on. We can yell out "stop." I will go ahead and put stop on the video, and we'll chat about it, see where we can go with it. I mean, this is a few years later after Dan Pink's. This is 2009. This video, so it'll be interesting to see how far we've come. So, are you ready? Ready.
All right.
Ready. Let's pink it.
Let's do it. Let's do it. All right.
I need to make a confession at the outset here. A little over 20 years ago, I did something that I regret, something that I'm not particularly proud of, something that in many ways I wish no one would ever know, but that here I feel kind of obliged to reveal. In the late 1980s, in a moment of youthful indiscretion, I went to law school. Now, in America, law is a professional degree. You get your university degree, then you go on to law school. And when I got to law school, I didn't do very well. To put it mildly, I didn't do very well. I, in fact, graduated in the part of my law school class that made the top 90% possible. Thank you. I never practiced law a day in my life. I pretty much wasn't allowed to. But today, against my better judgment, against the advice of my own wife, I want to try to dust off some of those legal skills, what's left of those legal skills. I don't want to tell you a story. I want to make a case. I want to make a hard-headed, evidence-based, dare I say lawyerly case for rethinking how we run our businesses. So, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, take a look at this. This is called the candle problem. Some of you might have seen this before. It's created in 1945 by a psychologist named Carl Duncker. Carl Duncker created this experiment that's used in a whole variety of experiments in behavioral science. And here's how it works. Suppose I'm the experimenter. I bring you into a room. I give you a candle, some thumbtacks, and some matches. And I say to you, your job is to attach the candle to the wall so the wax doesn't drip onto the table. Now, what would you do? Many people begin trying to thumbtack the candle to the wall. Doesn't work. Some people, and I saw somebody kind of make the motion over here, some people have a great idea where they light the match, melt the side of the candle, try to adhere it to the wall. It's an awesome idea. Doesn't work. And eventually, after 5 or 10 minutes, most people figure out the solution, which you can see here. The key is to overcome what's called functional fixedness. You look at that box and you see it only as a receptacle for the tacks, but it can also have this other function as a platform for the candle. The candle problem. Now, I want to tell you about an experiment using the candle problem done by a scientist named Sam Glucksberg, who's now at Princeton University in the US. This shows the power of incentives. Here's what he did. He gathered his participants and he said, I'm going to time you how quickly you can solve this problem. To one group, he said, I'm going to time you to establish norms, averages, for how long it typically takes someone to solve this sort of problem. To the second group, he offered rewards. He said, if you're in the top 25% of the fastest times, you get $5. If you're the fastest of everyone we're testing here today, you get $20. Okay, now this is several years ago, adjusted for inflation. It's a decent sum of money for a few minutes of work. Okay, it's a nice motivator. Question, how much faster did this group solve the problem? Answer, it took them on average 3 motivators, around carrots and sticks. That's actually fine for many kinds of 20th century motivators, around carrots and sticks. That's actually fine for many kinds of 20th century tasks. But for 21st century tasks, that mechanistic reward and punishment approach.
All right, I'm going to pause it right there. How you guys doing?
Good.
All right. I actually I meant to pause it a little earlier, but unfortunately, good old Mr. Hangout is being a little crabby. So, how many times have you guys seen this keynote at this point?
Oh, probably a half dozen.
Yeah, I've seen this a couple of times, Dan.
Yeah?
I'd say 2 or 3.
Where have is his research becoming even more relevant to our times at this point than it was 3 years ago? And you know, I know this thing he's been talking about, that this particular experiment, which I think is really kind of cool, And the reason I ask is, this particular video has like, what, 1.2 million views. I love what he has to say, and I'm sure you guys have talked about Dan Pink in your schools and whatever. I'm kind of wondering, how come this doesn't have 70 million views like the Coney video at this point? What do you guys think?
Well, I would just say that I don't know if it's more relevant now, but I think that its research is gaining more acceptance, at least in the school community. I'm trying to apply a lot of his stuff in my classroom, and I think we should. When we bring back the video, I think we skipped over a little part explaining with that candle experiment that people actually did worse in solving that problem the more they got paid, right?
Right.
And so what it does is turn on its head the notion that people are incentivized to particularly do creative and innovative things by extrinsic motivators. And I think, when I talk to my parents about some of the philosophies behind what I'm doing in the classroom, I do see more and more nodding heads rather than outright confusion over that notion of trying to tap into more intrinsic motivators. I mean, really, for us as educators, you just replace money with grades. Mm-hmm. It's about the same parallel.
Isn't it interesting that Dan Pink, who really here is talking much more about business, him and both Seth Godin really talk about marketing and business, and how I don't think 10 years ago I would have ever thought as an educator I'd be listening to somebody who's like a business motivational type of speaker. Because 10 years ago that type of person was definitely somebody not like Dan Pink or Seth Godin. Did you think that we'd get to this point?
I think there's still a little bit of skepticism there, Dan, regarding business writers and how their message is adapted or adopted by the education community. So, but I definitely think, I posted this in the chat. Pink's such a great storyteller. He's funny. He hits the emotion, and since his talk came out and other talks like it on YouTube, I've definitely noticed people, like at the school level where I work, in academic council settings, for example, becoming more skeptical of some of the habits and practices that schools we've just had in place for a long time, and we haven't really questioned. I know Alfie Cohn's written about these kinds of things for a long time, and I'm a big Alfie Kohn fan, but I also know he's a very polarizing figure, mm-hmm. and I think Dan Pink's not. I've heard him live. I saw him give an author talk at a local bookstore here in the Bay Area a couple of years ago. He's just the kind of guy you want to hang out with and spend some time with. He's funny. He's a great storyteller, and he creates a sticky message.
All right. Well, let's continue with his message, and I'll just backtrack it like about 30 seconds here, because he's about to really get into his intrinsic, extrinsic.
And what's interesting about this experiment is that it's not an aberration. This has been replicated over and over and over again for nearly 40 years. These contingent motivators. If you do this, then you get that. Work in some circumstances, but for a lot of tasks, they actually either don't work or often they do harm. This is one of the most robust findings in social science and also one of the most ignored. I spent the last couple of years looking at the science of human motivation, particularly the dynamics of extrinsic motivators and intrinsic motivators. And I'm telling you, it's not even close. If you look at the science, there is a mismatch between what science knows and what business does. And what's alarming here is that our business operating system, think of the set of assumptions and protocols beneath our businesses, how we motivate people, how we apply our human resources. It's built entirely around these extrinsic motivators, around carrots and sticks. That's actually fine for many kinds of 20th century tasks. But for 21st century tasks, that mechanistic reward and punishment approach doesn't work, often doesn't work, and often does harm. Let me show you what I mean. So Glucksberg did another experiment similar to this, where he presented the problem in a slightly different way, like this up here. Okay? Attach the candle to the wall so the wax doesn't drip onto the table. Same deal. You were timing for norms. You were incentivizing. What happened this time? This time, the incentivized group kicked the other group's butt. Why? Because when the tasks are out of the box, it's pretty easy, isn't it? If then
3 minutes are up, by the way.
Work really well for those sorts of tasks, where there's a simple set of rules and a clear destination to go to. Rewards, by their very nature, narrow our focus, concentrate the mind. That's why they work in so many.
Stop. Can we stop there?
Tasks like this.
Go for it.
So I think the thing there that made me yell stop was the idea of narrowing the focus. I think this is why this has maybe gained more traction in education the last couple of years, is because with all the ed reform stuff going on, a lot of people have a lot of angst over this, and this is one of the problems, is that with the high-stakes accountability movement and the direction of a lot of the ed reformers, it really is narrowing the focus. And for some of us, in a way that we don't think is very good. And so if you view this from an incentive perspective, that incentives work, then narrowing the focus makes a lot of sense, right? You narrow the focus, kids have these specific standards they got to meet, Common Core standards, whatever you want, and we're going to reward them, or we're going to reward teachers for achieving those standards. But as Pink, I think, is going to talk about a little bit more here, it doesn't work very well for things beyond mechanistic rote stuff.
Right, and this also plays into the whole teacher evaluation system now that everybody's doing too, right? Which is getting a lot of flack, and merit pay, and a lot of these things that people are proposing. He's going to talk, I think, a little more about business, or maybe Wall Street a little bit in here. In there, and I'm also interested in that. I think it's somewhere beyond this keynote. He actually, maybe it's on his blog or something. I remember him talking about when the Wall Street collapse, or at least over the last few years, kind of reflecting on that in a way of with the whole intrinsic versus extrinsic motivators and how that had to play into that. Yep, merit pay.
Yeah, Pink wrote a blog post about merit pay, and I think he was interviewed in Washington Post or something, and he expanded on it a little bit. I don't know if there's a way to share that link.
You know what? We have show notes, and I'm going to go ahead and throw it in the show notes to post at another time. But, yeah, all right.
But what is his central thesis on merit pay? It's that it works up to, as long as you've got to get teachers to a certain point, but by rewarding them with rewarding good test scores with pay probably doesn't work. That's my assumption. I haven't read the post.
Right. Yeah, basically his argument is that teaching is not a mechanistic thing that you can just incentivize there, that it's creative, that it's hard to solve these problems, that they're human problems, and so they're very complicated, and they take creativity to solve, which is why most of us would say that teaching is a hard profession in that sense. And so basically he says, yes, you need to pay people well. You basically take money out of the equation, but that paying them more isn't going to make them be better teachers. Paying them a certain base amount so that they're comfortable and they don't have to worry about money, then yes, you need that. If you pay them too little, then you don't get people into the profession in the first place. But that after that really it doesn't have a whole lot of effect. And he also points to some of the studies that I'm sure you've all seen out of Tennessee and New York and stuff that shows the merit pay hasn't apparently worked in places where they've tried it on a large scale.
Right, and that shouldn't be surprising at all after all of this research. How do you intrinsically, well, all of us are most likely intrinsically motivated to teach because we want students to learn and we believe all students can learn. That's a great thing. Getting 60 or whatever percent that, getting a lot of other teachers intrinsically motivated to teach, I don't know. That maybe is that's the conundrum, which goes back to why do you get into teaching in the first place? But, all right, let's move on.
motivators, around carrots and sticks. That's actually fine for many kinds of 20th century tasks. But for 21st century tasks, that mechanistic reward and punishment approach doesn't work, often doesn't work, and often does harm. Let me show you what I mean. So Glucksberg did another experiment similar to this, where he presented the problem in a slightly different way, like this up here. Okay? Attach the candle to the wall so the wax doesn't drip onto the table. Same deal. You were timing for norms. You were incentivizing. What happened this time? This time, the incentivized group kicked the other group's butt. Why? Because when the tasks are out of the box, it's pretty easy, isn't it? If-then rewards work really well for those sorts of tasks, where there's a simple set of rules and a clear destination to go to. Rewards, by their very nature, narrow our focus, concentrate the mind. That's why they work in so many cases. And so for tasks like this, of narrowed focus, where you just see the goal right there, zoom straight ahead to it, they work really well. But for the real candle problem, you don't want to be looking like this. The solution's not over here. The solution's on the periphery. You want to be looking around. That reward actually narrows our focus and restricts our possibility. Let me tell you why this is so important. In Western Europe, in many parts of Asia, in North America, in Australia, white-collar workers are doing less of this kind of work and more of this kind of work. That routine, rule-based, left-brain work, certain kinds of accounting, certain kinds of financial analysis, certain kinds of computer programming, has become fairly easy to outsource, fairly easy to automate. Software can do it faster. Low-cost providers around the world can do it cheaper. So what really matters are the more right-brain, creative, conceptual kinds of abilities. Think about your own work. Think about your own work. Are the problems that you face, or even
stop here for a second?
About here.
You bet.
Are those kinds of problems?
So
right.
he just mentioned right brain thinking, and this is a good time to point out that Daniel Pink, this talk is about is based on his book Drive, which is a fantastic book. I highly recommend that everyone read it. It's changed the way I thought about myself as a teacher. But his prior book is called A Whole New Mind, and it's all about how the 21st century is going to require a lot more students to develop more of their right brain. And he writes specifically about education, and he's not just a business writer. He definitely knows his stuff about. Oh, there it is. Nice. And so we as a faculty all read that book a few years ago, and basically its premise is that the current education system, or the traditional education system, places a premium on those left brain qualities, the ability to take information and spit it back out and analyze information and language skills, but not so much the creativity, innovation, empathy skills that we see the trends moving. So that's another book I would recommend.
Now, Carl, did you have your students read that book?
Yes, we've had our students for the last 4 or 5 years, I've lost track, read it, and then they Skype with Daniel Pink and ask him questions about it.
Oh, that's very cool.
So actually we just did that, was that a week ago? Yeah, last Friday. We had this year's Skype event with him. We also stream that out for those of you tech people wondering about that. We use Ustream to stream it out so that parents or other folks can watch. And yeah, I mean, now we talk about A Whole New Mind, but kids also read some excerpts from Drive, and they talk about both. And he again emphasized he wants to make sure, because there's been some pushback about, well, what's wrong with left brain skills, and he repeatedly emphasizes the title of the book is A Whole New Mind. I'm not arguing that left brain stuff isn't important. It is very important, and we definitely still need that, and you definitely still, all of us have both of those. He was just making the argument that they think sometimes, particularly at the time he wrote that book, that the creative side, what he would call R-directed thinking, not so much right brain thinking, but R-directed thinking, what we associate with the right brain, even though the science on that's a bit mixed. But he says that he feels like that's so underemphasized, and certainly that's what we've heard from folks like Sir Ken Robinson and stuff like that, is that schools have not done a particularly good job of emphasizing those, and you know, we're all, well, at least I assume we're all facing budget cuts, and we tend to cut those creative areas and keep the math teachers. And as a math teacher, I'm excited about that, but as a parent and as a citizen, I'm not so excited about that.
Right, exactly. Hey, Matt, you have kids, right?
Yes. Well.
Oh, you might have kids too. I don't know.
Yeah, so I'm both a father and I work in a school. I'm not a classroom teacher. I'm a technology director.
Right. So motivation, and after seeing this, how has that influenced how you parent, or has it at all?
No, I mean, you know, a lot of people talk about. I mean, a lot of people talk about when you have kids, and you know, I've been through a pre-service program, School of Education, and studied different, you know, theories of learning and whatnot. But you know, when you have a child and you watch the way they grow up naturally, and you watch the way they learn naturally, that's very much for me, it's very much in conflict with the way we kind of structure high school learning environments. I'm a director of technology in a high school here in San Francisco. And so, yeah, I mean, it's so having a child who's 21 months now. I mean, it's changed things a lot. And you know, Pink's message is just so brutally simple. He just takes something that I think, you know, the research supports, yes, but we really all know kind of within our hearts, and he creates a great story about it and tells it in a very compelling and fashion. And I'm interested in what Carl's students, how their response to A Whole New Mind was. What was their general kind of take? Did it create any aha moments for them? Did they experience any conflicts in the way?
Did they see examples of it in their own life? You know?
Yeah. Well, it's certainly interesting. I mean, over the course of the 4 or 5 years, so we've had 500 plus kids, and these are freshmen, read it and discuss it. And there's certain, you know, with 500 kids, you got a variety of opinions. There's certainly some kids who really don't like it, and who think that you know, grades and incentives and money, you know, that they talk so much about that in A Whole New Mind, but that you know, they're more of my left-directed thinkers, I think that no, that's really important, that creative stuff. Yeah, it's nice. They don't say that, but they don't see that. And then there are other kids say, exactly, I've felt like this the entire time I've been in school, that the things that I'm good at and the things that I like have not been valued, and I still find them very important. And it's really interesting when they get the chance to actually question him, because some of the kids will push back and say, well, what about this and what about that? And he's excellent at first of all talking about what they ask, but then also reflecting it back to them and asking, well, what do you think? You know, and he listens to them, which we really appreciate. He's an excellent teacher, actually. And so it's always fascinating, because if you remember A Whole New Mind, in the first part of that book, he makes a very left-brain case for it. And then he branches out into what it looks like. And there's certain people who love the first half of the book because it's left brain, and then some people love the second half because it's more right brain, and they flip, and they say, well, why did he make that case? I love this part. And the other people are saying, oh, I hated it after those first 4 chapters. And so it's kind of funny.
His graphic novel, Johnny Bunko, has anybody on the call read that one?
Yeah.
That's a great one too, and should be required. For me, it should be required reading for every high school student in the country.
All right. Well, hey, let's continue. And just so you know, my chat, I can barely type in that chat when the video plays. Thank you, Google Chrome and Google Hangouts. So I may just say 3 minutes and or whatever, or hey, or whatnot at this point. So, all right, let's continue.
Problems, do they have a clear set of rules and a single solution? No. The rules are mystifying. The solution, if it exists at all, is surprising and non-obvious. Everybody in this room is dealing with their own version of the candle problem. And for candle problems of any kind, in any field, those if-then rewards, the things around which we've built so many of our businesses, don't work. Now, I mean, it makes me crazy. And this is not, here's the thing, this is not a feeling. Okay? I'm a lawyer. I don't believe in feelings. This is not a philosophy. I'm an American. I don't believe in philosophy. This is a fact. Or as we say in my hometown of Washington, D.C., a true fact. Let me give you an example of what I mean. Let me marshal the evidence here, because I'm not telling you a story. I'm making a case, ladies and gentlemen of the jury. Some evidence. Dan Ariely, one of the great economists of our time, he and 3 colleagues did a study with some MIT students. They gave these MIT students a bunch of games that involved creativity and motor skills and concentration. And they offered them for performance 3 levels of rewards. Small reward, medium reward, large reward. Okay? Do really well, you get the large reward, on down. What happened? As long as the task involved only mechanical skill, bonuses worked as they would be expected. The higher the pay, the better the performance. Okay?
Yeah.
But once the task called for even rudimentary cognitive skill, a larger reward led to poorer performance. Then they said, okay, let's see if there's any cultural bias here. Let's go to Madurai, India and test this. Reward standard of living is lower. In Madurai, a reward that's modest by North American standards is more meaningful there. Same deal. A bunch of games, 3 levels of rewards. What happens? People offered the medium level of rewards, did no better than people offered the small rewards. But this time, people offered the highest rewards. They did worst of all. In 8 of the 9 tasks we examined across 3 experiments, higher incentives led to worse performance. Is this some kind of touchy-feely socialist conspiracy going on here? No, these are economists from MIT, from Carnegie Mellon, from the University of Chicago. And do you know who sponsored this research? The Federal Reserve Bank of the United States. That's the American experience. Let's go across the pond to the London School of Economics. LSE, London School of Economics, alma mater of 11 Nobel laureates in economics. Training ground for great economic thinkers like George Soros and Friedrich Hayek and Mick Jagger. Just last month, economists at LSE looked at 51 studies of pay-for-performance plans inside of companies. Here's what the economists there said. We find that financial incentives can result in a negative impact on overall performance.
All right, I'm going to stop right there. Are you guys familiar? Now, just a couple of days ago, edX just came online. Mm-hmm. This is the collaboration between Harvard and MIT to create basically free and open courseware. If you want to go to Harvard and MIT, well, now you can for free. And it really makes me think about this motivation, you know, like the difference between somebody who's going to go ahead and then pay to get the piece of paper that says they went to Harvard, because they're going to pay thinking they're going to get, the reward is I've got the paper and now that's going to go get me a job, that's going to go get me something, you know, fruitful and prestige and all that. Now, what they've done is they've incentivized learning. Basically, what I'm wondering is if by creating this open and free courseware, are they creating a learning culture that's not based on rewards but intrinsic motivation? So now, if you want to go to Harvard but you don't want to pay and you want to just learn, and are we actually going to be creating students that are just doing that because they want to learn?
I think we could be. I think the big gap right now is people still worried about the accreditation part. They're still worried about the authority part. What piece of paper do I have that proves that I know this? And that's where the badges movement comes in and all those other things. And I think we really are in a transition period where it's tough. When I think about my own daughter who's just turned 12, I think she's kind of in that middle ground where the the old-fashioned way, if you want to say that, of doing it, where you need a piece of paper and you need somebody to certify that you've done this and you've paid a lot of money to prove that, is still valuable. But somewhere right in the middle for her is going to be when suddenly that's no longer important at all. And I would think that maybe 20 years from now we won't be having this conversation. It'll be, yeah, you know, show me what you know how to do. You know, show me your portfolio, basically.
Real.
Yeah, something real, not just a piece of paper, and that'll be good. And you know, the interesting thing is going to be is how do people who aren't Harvard and MIT compete with that? Because I think Harvard and MIT are still going to have people come to them for a long time because there is a huge value in what they do face to face there.
Sure.
But when you're talking about I can do Harvard and MIT face-to-face, I can do Harvard and MIT online, but am I going to go to my state school and do face-to-face when I have that virtual option? That's where it's going to get tricky, especially with the funding issues we're having in state schools, at least in Colorado.
Yeah,
you will
go ahead,
get
Kevin.
a certificate if you take one of these courses online, correct? So there
Correct.
is still going to be some, you know, you can prove that you took the course, you took these tests, and you passed it. But yeah, I think I can't imagine, you know, all of these schools lasting when this kind of instruction, technical instruction, is available. But yeah, we'll still need that.
Going to college is going to be what culture do you want to be associated with. It's not going to be so much about, well, maybe, but you understand, like if anyone can just sign up to go to Harvard, there's going to be a difference about getting the learning and then being part of Harvard's culture. That may be where you know, you see that the big economic divide, perhaps. But I mean, I got a 7-year-old, and I'm starting to wonder at one point, you know, oh no, when she gets into college, you know, the rates are going to be so high. Like this is, I'm already looking at it like this is going to be really, really bad. However, by the time she gets there, maybe 10, 11 years from now, perhaps she goes and, you know, takes one of the open free classes, and it doesn't matter because she can do a whole lot of stuff. She can write a program. She can create something, and you know, and she's motivated to do so.
And I think, you know, nobody has a crystal ball, but I think the one thing we know is that there will be more options.
Yeah.
There will be more, you know, options that we can't even imagine right now. To the edX point, so just to put my skeptic's hat on, how is that any different than MIT's OpenCourseWare, Stanford on iTunes, and you know, this stuff's been around for 10 plus years. Is it going to be better technology? Is it going to be a higher production value? Is that the idea behind it?
I think that there's more interaction between the student and, I don't know if it's the instructor, but there are tools involved. It's not just consuming the information. You have to pass assessments through the process.
You have to be a part of the class. You can't. It's not just sit and get.
I don't know if they have TAs grading your papers.
And I think there's also it's the idea of they're building a platform that from what I've read, they're going to release basically the source code for what they're building it on, so that other people can use it and modify it and stuff like that. And so that's, again, I think we're in that creative destruction phase where people are trying to figure out how to do this. And the question is the learning going to win out, or are the folks who want to make money off of it going to win out, or can both of those win out?
Agreed. All right, let's move on.
There's a mismatch between what science knows and what business does. And what worries me as we stand here in the rubble of the economic collapse is that too many organizations are making their decisions, their policies about talent and people, based on assumptions that are outdated, unexamined, and rooted more in folklore than in science. And if we really want to get out of this economic mess, and if we really want high performance on those definitional tasks of the 21st century, the solution is not to do more of the wrong things, to entice people with a sweeter carrot or threaten them with a sharper stick. We need a whole new approach. The good news about all this is that the scientists who've been studying motivation have given us this new approach. It's an approach built much more around intrinsic motivation, around the desire to do things because they matter, because we like it, because they're interesting, because they're part of something important. And to my mind, that new operating system for our businesses revolves around three elements: autonomy, mastery, and purpose. Autonomy, the urge to direct our own lives. Mastery, the desire to get better and better at something that matters. And purpose, the yearning to do what we do in the service of something larger than ourselves. These are the building blocks of an entirely new operating system for our businesses. I want to talk today only about autonomy. In the 20th century, we came up with this idea of management. Management did not emanate from nature. Okay? Management isn't it's not a tree, it's a television set. Okay? Somebody invented it. And it doesn't mean it's going to work forever. Management is great. Traditional notions of management are great if you want compliance. But if you want engagement, self-direction works better. Let me give you some examples of some kind of radical notions of self-direction. And what this means, you don't see a lot of it, but you see the first stirrings of something really interesting going on. Because what it means is, it means paying people adequately and fairly, absolutely. Getting the issue of money off the table, and then giving people lots of autonomy. Let me give you some examples. How many of you have heard of the company Atlassian? Okay, looks like less than half. Atlassian is an Australian software company, and they do something incredibly cool. A few times a year, they tell their engineers, go for the next 24 hours and work on anything you want. As long as it's not part of your regular job. Work on anything you want. So the engineers use this time to come up with a cool patch of code, to come up with an elegant hack. Then they present all of these stuff that they've developed to their teammates, to the rest of the company, in this wild and woolly all-hands meeting at the end of the day. And then, being Australians, everybody has a beer. They call them FedEx days. Why? Because you have to deliver something overnight. It's not bad. It's a huge trademark violation, but it's pretty clever. That one day of intense autonomy has produced a whole array of software fixes that might never have existed. And it's worked so well that Atlassian has taken it to the next level with 20% time, done famously at Google, where engineers can spend 20% of their time working on anything they want. They have autonomy over their time, their task, their team, their technique. Okay, radical amounts of autonomy. And at Google, as many of you know, about half of the new products in a typical year are birthed during that 20% time. Things like Gmail, Orchid, Google News. Let me give you an even more radical example of it. Something called the results-only work environment, the ROW. Created by 2 American consultants in place at about a dozen companies around North America. In a row, people don't have schedules. They show up when they want. They don't.
I'm going to stop it right there, just because I can't type in this chat window. But I'm seeing that term "row" come up a lot more in education. But one thing he said, just a little bit behind, was he said something about engagement. And I don't know how you guys are doing with your iPad, or your one-to-one type of environments, or if you're dealing with those at all. But one of the things that the criticisms of one-to-one programs and iPads is that they don't raise test scores. But more and more what I'm hearing is that's not important. What is important is engagement, because you can measure engagement. You can correlate engagement to quote-unquote achievement. But it's interesting to hear him say this 9 years ago, because now all I'm hearing is engagement, engagement. That's what's important. I don't know about you guys. You can agree or disagree. I'll just move on.
It's brilliant, Dan. Nothing to add.
All right. Let's. We can watch.
Well, I can just add, since let me just say something real quick. He just talked about 20% time, and that's something that I've been experimenting with my students the past couple of years. I have a 20% project in my English class, and we have quite radical autonomy in that class. I have one student who has decided to So I give 20% of the time. They can work on any project they want. They give formal proposals about regarding the project itself, and they take that time and they do a wide variety of things. One student is starting his own tutoring pool. Another student is trying to design his own car, and we have students who are writing novels and trying to make short movies. Carl, you asked how much time do you have in your classes. I'm not sure. So, what do you mean by that? As far as
like how long are your class periods and how often you see your kids? I'm just trying to figure out. 20% time is an idea I love. There's just absolutely no way I can figure out how to implement it in our schedule. And so I'm always curious.
We're on a 7-day cycle, so we have A through G days, and then one of those 7 days we meet for an hour, and then 5 of those other 7 days we meet for 45 minutes. And so that hour day is their 20% day. But you know, students do what happens is a lot of the students do get so intrinsically motivated that they work on these projects over the weekends and outside of class as well.
Cool.
We have this with our math teachers. They have lots of time. They have like an hour and a half with their kids every day in our middle school, and so they have like a problem-solving day. Trying to get this idea of 20% time out there, but hasn't quite.
Yeah, that would be great. I have with my algebra students, I have them 4 days a week. 59-minute class periods, but we also have, of course, PLC days and assembly days and testing days and whatever. So I see them about 125 days a year, not even full days. And again, it's only 4 days a week. They have 1 day a week where they don't have my class. And it's just when I talk with other folks who have them for 80 or 90 minutes a day, it's like, yeah, that'd be nice. That'd be good.
Yeah.
That gives you a little bit more flexibility, I think.
Yeah, well, I'm sorry, Kevin.
Oh, real quick, just the English curriculum itself, I do have material that I need to get through and skills that they need to get across, but it's not like algebra. So there's a little more flexibility, and I can, you know, decide as an educator that I may sacrifice certain themes that I've covered in the past in my English classes in order to try this, and it, you know, it doesn't hurt them dramatically.
Yep. Yeah, and my school has 75-minute classes. All blocks are, you know, it's a block schedule.
I hate you all.
well, Carl, we you know, so it seems like something like this would plug into a model like that quite naturally, and so we're not quite there, and it's still relatively new, but it's, you know, these kinds of things are definitely something that I think we would like to see happen more across the board. And really, so what Pink, when he was talking about this, and I put the comment in the chat, 20% time sounds like, you know, where your students or your employees or whoever are able to work on projects or self-direct and self-manage their time or just kind of follow their passions. Sounds like a Montessori classroom to me. So these are things these are models for designing learning environments that really have been in, so one-to-one, iPads, whatever aside, I mean, these really are things that have been around a long, long time. I was at a John Seeley Brown keynote at Digital Media and Learning 2012 this past March, and he started out with a slide of like 4 or 5, you know, great technologists like, you know, Sergey Brin and, you know, a couple others, and he said, what do they all have in common? And they all went to Montessori school, you know. So you know, these models are out there. It's just, I think we're all 3 of us, and Dan, I don't know if you work in a high school, but high schools are, for me, the toughest nut to crack. So just for a lot of reasons, we could go on about that, but I think it's the most challenging environment to do many of these things in.
Well, and just to go back to what Pink said in his video right here, he talked about management is not natural. It was an invention, and it's more like a television than a tree. Well, the classroom situation is also an invention. It's a product of the industrial era to churn out employees of the Industrial Revolution. So, you know, a lot of us think we can just shake this up quite a bit. It's obviously a lot of work. Schools are very entrenched, but you know, I love the Montessori model. I think we need to bring it into the high school a lot more.
It's just that pressure because you got to get these kids into college, so you got to get them to take those SATs all right, let's take it to the end.
Don't have to be in the office at a certain time or any time. They just have to get their work done. How they do it, when they do it, where they do it is totally up to them. Meetings in these kinds of environments are optional. What happens? Almost across the board. Productivity goes up, worker engagement goes up, worker satisfaction goes up, turnover goes down. Autonomy, mastery, and purpose. These are the building blocks of a new way of doing things. Now, some of you might look at this and say, that sounds nice, but it's utopian. And I say, nope. I have proof. In the mid-1990s, Microsoft started an encyclopedia called Encarta. They had deployed all the right incentives. All the right incentives. They paid professionals to write and edit thousands of articles. Well-compensated managers oversaw the whole thing to make sure it came in on budget and on time. A few years later, another encyclopedia got started. Different model, right? Do it for fun. No one gets paid a cent or a euro or a yen. Do it because you like to do it. Now, if you had, just 10 years ago, if you had gone to an economist anywhere and said, hey, I got these two different models for creating an encyclopedia. If they went head-to-head, who would win? 10 years ago, you could not have found a single sober economist anywhere on planet Earth who would have predicted the Wikipedia model. This is the titanic battle between these two approaches. This is the Ali Frazier of motivation, right? This is the thriller in Manila, all right? Intrinsic motivators versus extrinsic motivators. Autonomy, mastery, and purpose versus carrots and sticks. And who wins? Intrinsic motivation, autonomy, mastery, and purpose in a knockout. Let me wrap up. There's a mismatch between what science knows and what business does. And here's what science knows. 1, those 20th century rewards, those motivators we think are the natural part of business, do work, but only in a surprisingly narrow band of circumstances. 2, those if-then rewards often destroy creativity. 3, the secret to high performance isn't rewards and punishments, but that unseen intrinsic drive, the drive to do things for their own sake, the drive to do things because they matter. And here's the best part. Here's the best part. We already know this. The science confirms what we know in our hearts. So, if we repair this mismatch between what science knows and what business does, if we bring our motivation, notions of motivation into the 21st century, if we get past this lazy, dangerous ideology of carrots and sticks, we can strengthen our businesses, we can solve a lot of those candle problems, and maybe, we can change the world. I rest my case.
All right. Okay. Final thoughts. Dan Pink, 3 years later.
So I have a question for the panel here. I'm trying to take this on, and I'm trying to make I see this primarily through the lens of my students. I think about my students when I think about this, keeping my students motivated. But I'm in a school where kids are very highly motivated by grades. A lot of them are probably with some of the students in your class, Carl, that are skeptical about Pink. Grades are really important. What are your thoughts on replacing grades? Aren't badges just another carrot? And if so, then what should we do about grades?
Well, I think badges certainly can be a carrot. I think that's one of the reasons I'm not completely excited about them, but I don't think they have to be. I mean, I think a lot of the folks who are promoting badges see it as just a way to identify things that you've done and are capable of doing, and so they don't see it so much as which folks who like grades would say the same thing, but I think it's a harder connection to make with grades, that a B in algebra when you were 15 somehow indicates something that you can do, whereas a badge that says that you can create something in HTML5 is a little more meaningful. I think that the tough thing that I see with grades, particularly at the high school level, is they've been trained for, we've trained them for 9 years before they get to us. And I find myself referring, even though I don't believe it, I find myself referring back to that because it's kind of the lowest common denominator, to use a math term, of something that kids can relate to. And so, in my perfect world, I wouldn't be giving grades, but right now, and with the curriculum that I have to get across to them, it's not intrinsically motivating for them. And so I'm kind of in this stuck ground, catch-22 ground of I still believe the stuff I'm teaching them is valuable to a certain extent, but it's without that carrot right now, and even with that carrot, I'm not reaching them. And so I really struggle with that. I try as much as possible to de-emphasize grades while working within a system that requires them.
Right.
Yeah, and 20 years ago, I remember being in, college student, School of Education, talking about portfolios and how portfolios were going to play such a huge role in the learning process. And here we are 20 years later, and now we have the tools to do it, right? We have the tools to effectively build out the portfolio learning process within our communities. But so I'm a little bit disheartened because every time I've tried, even by working the pockets, the grade is just so important, and that's where all of the effort is put. The portfolio learning oftentimes it's not taken very seriously, and it breaks down, and then people say, oh, portfolio learning just doesn't work, instead of, it's kind of like it's failing in this larger, broader system. So what I do think, kind of like small-scale portfolio interventions, without trying to get too big into it, just starting there and just trying to build that out a little bit, because I do think parents, really, I see Morgan, who was on the camera a couple minutes ago, I don't really care about how she's represented right now. I don't, and this may change, but I don't care about numbers and letters and that sort of thing. I just want to see the kinds of things she does, and so I know that's going to be the case when she goes to school. So portfolios could be a great intervention for changing that, because I think parents just want to know what their kids are doing, and if we only give them symbols and numbers, that's all they have, that's all they're really going to care about.
Aren't portfolios just a way to take those if-then rewards? But then when you put them in a portfolio, you create something that's much greater. It's a body of work. I'm wondering if there isn't some sort of compromise there when it comes to these types of things. A grade is not tangible. You can tell kids they can get a grade, and some kids are going to be like, well, I don't know what that means. It's out here. A badge, maybe a little bit more tangible. Creating a portfolio starting when they're in first grade, through a blog where they could post all their work, and you can see the growth of their work from the first to the time they get to college. That's much more valuable, but that's a long game, and that's why I think a lot of people don't get it. They like those if done. They're addicted to the if done reward. That's the conundrum. Okay. Well, hey. Thanks again, guys, for joining. Carl Fish. Carl, where can we find you online?
Well, not very many places right now because I haven't written anything in a long time. But the blog would be thefishbowl.blogspot.com, and hopefully I'll write something soon. And you can find me on Twitter at Carl Fish, and pretty much Carl Fish everywhere. But I enjoyed it. Thanks for having me, and it's always good to think through these things and reevaluate my own practices. So it's good.
Appreciate it. I appreciate your thoughts. And Kevin, where are we finding you online?
You could just search for Brookhouser, Brookhousser, but I keep a blog at iteachithink.com.
All right. And MJ Montaigne.
You got it. MJ Montaigne on Twitter and just about everywhere else. Or Google, Matt Montaigne.
Matt Montaigne.
Or come to Burlingame. You can see me here too.
All right.
All right. Just to kind of take us out, just make sure to check out the Wilderness Classroom Field Report that we'll be posting tomorrow. That is, of course, with Wilderness Dave and Amy, our newest podcast on the EdReach Network. And, of course, you can follow me. I'm D. Rezek on Twitter, and you can follow EdReach us on Twitter as well, or like our Facebook page at facebook.com/EdReach, Google Plus at G+, whatever that is, /EdReach, plus.to/EdReach. All these great ways to get the latest blog posts, podcasts, and news coming out of EdReach. Thanks again for joining us, gentlemen. We will see you on the internet.
Thanks, Dan.
Thanks again, guys.
Thanks, guys.
You're watching the EdReach Network. You're watching the EdReach Network.